So, Chaim. So in the Friedrich Rebbe Siddur, it said that it said in the Siddur that the sphere for tonight was Hoid Shebechesed. The previous Rebbe changed the sphere so that it read correctly Chesed Shebehoid. So the Rebbe explained that because the previous Rebbe is the leader of the Jewish people, so whatever happens to him is relevant to all the Jewish people. And the fact that there was a mistake in the Siddur means that there was something missing. What was missing? Pesach Sheni, as we all know, the message of Pesach Sheni is that it's never too late. It's always possible to fix anything that happened in your life. The Rebbe actually said that today's the day, starting from tonight and tomorrow, it's the time you should think about people in your life that you may have not said what you should have said, or you said something you shouldn't have said, and reach out, because never too late. Parents, their children, or friends, or whatever, things, reach out in the distant past. Something you always wish you should have said, and reach out and make that connection, share that message. So the idea of Pesach Sheni is very connected to the sphere of the day. Hoid is one of the lowest spheres. Hoid is about submission before Hashem. Even though you don't understand it, you don't appreciate, you still submit yourself before Hashem. So Hoid is about going down. Hoid is about making mistakes. Hoid is about being in a state of distance. Chesed Shebehoid means that although you're in a state of distance, Hashem shows you why you had that distance. Hashem shows you Chesed Shebehoid. It shows you the purpose of why you fell, which is the meaning of Pesach Sheni, that Hashem guides us in Shuvah and shows us where we were and where we have to get to and why this happened. Shuvah doesn't just mean that you make a decision from now on to do the right thing. Shuvah means you've transformed the past, that whatever happened in the past, instead of it being a sin, turns into a mitzvah. So Pesach Sheni underscores the power of a Jew, the power of connection to Hashem, the power we have to reach out, you go beyond time and space and to change the past, and also to change the future. Just like the Jewish people who asked Hashem for another chance, got Hashem to agree to give them another chance and to give them a new mitzvah, so too, if we are upset about the fact that we're missing the light of Mashiach. The word light in Hebrew is the numerical equivalent to 207. So it says we're missing in the time of exile 207 mitzvahs. So if we're upset that we can't do mitzvahs, so Hashem listens to a Jew. Pesach Sheni tells us that it matters to Hashem how we feel. Hashem cares how we feel. All the other mitzvahs and all the days of the year tell us that we should care how Hashem what Hashem wants us to do. But Pesach Sheni tells us that Hashem cares how we feel. And Hashem empowers us on this day to make things good. So I want to share with you tonight a story about this theme. It's a theme of how something that may have set us in the wrong path doesn't mean that we're stuck in that path. We can always change course. It also underscores how when a tzaddik says something, it's never too late to go back and to absorb that message. Just like with ourselves, with our friends, it's never too late to share something that should have been said before. So, but first I want to share, before I share the featured story tonight, I want to share another story as an intro, as the way this is printed in the wonderful Sefer To Know and to Care by Rabbi Tauger. He begins this story that I'm sharing with the following introduction of the story of Baal Shem Tov. Baal Shem Tov's successor was Mzitcha Magid. Mzitcha Magid, he guided a 12-year-old boy who later briefly became his successor before he moved to Israel, Mendel of Vitebsk, Mendel Haradaka. Mendel of Vitebsk was brought to Baal Shem Tov when he was 12 years old. And the Baal Shem Tov, when he was spent Shabbos in the court of the Baal Shem Tov in Mezhebush, the Baal Shem Tov didn't show any special attention to him, except for the fact that he delayed the prayers until he arrived. But other than that, there was nothing special that happened. However, Motzei Shabbos, by the Lava Malka, Baal Shem Tov shared a story about a young man who was journeying in his life through various things that happened to him. And the Baal Shem Tov went through a very long story about a certain young man. And at the Baal Shem Tov's table, whereas the all-star members of the Baal Shem Tov's court Rabbi Yaakov Polnoe, and the Mendel Magid, and this young boy, the Mendel Viteb school, later succeeded in the Mzisha Magid. So the story was shared, and it became apparent later that this story that the Moshe shared was actually the story of Reb Mendel Haradokar's own life. So many years later, when Reb Mendel set off to go to Israel, he visited Rabbi Yaakov Polnoe, and Rabbi Yaakov said to him, do you know where you're up to in the story? Because at the time Hashem shared the story, they didn't know what the story meant. It was about his life, Reb Mendel Haradokar's life, but it was about the future. So Reb Mendel said, I know where I'm up to in the story. I know that before I arrive in Israel, I have to visit you. I have to visit you because I think the Baal Shem Tov alluded in the story that I was going to visit you before I went to Israel. And that's why I'm here. So on that note, the idea of being a shepherd to souls and telling the person the information he needs to hear in his life that guides them for their entire life, I want to share with you the following story. This story, besides being in the print and to care, is also shared many times by Zayn Gesund und Stark, Shlomo Zarchi, one of the spiritual mentors in the yeshiva, the central Chabad yeshiva in 770 in the Rebbe's yeshiva. Yoel Kahn was known as a prodigy at the youngest age, and he would often go to Lakewood to give a class in chassidus. Lakewood wasn't known to be, at the time especially, to be anything that was friendly to the teachings of chassidus. So although the administration knew about the class, but they didn't want to be associated with it at all. In fact, maybe the opposite, but either way, many students attended the class. Students were curious about the teachings of chassidus. There was one student who would speak to Rabbi Yoel before the class, after the class. So not everyone came to the class, but Rabbi Yoel's arrival, Rabbi Yoel, everyone knew he was someone who had a memory like a tape recorder, and he would always memorize the Rebbe's teachings and then repeat them after Shabbos. He was a legendary person. So just people didn't want to necessarily learn chassidus, they wanted to talk to him. They would talk to the boys before the class, after the class. There was one boy who was an Eloi, who was a great Torah genius, and he was very popular as well. And Rabbi Yoel invited him time and again to join the class. He didn't want to join the class. And the other boys said that this boy is very influential, and if he joins the class, you're going to see a lot of other students will also join the class. So Rabbi Yoel didn't give up, and he talked to him several times, but the guy, he wasn't interested. However, he told Rabbi Yoel the following. He said to Rabbi Yoel, if you will arrange for me an audience of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, that would be very interesting to me. That was something I would really look forward to. And perhaps you could do this for me. I don't know in chassidus, but I do want to meet the Rebbe. So the Rebbe's secretariat didn't really have any time for him to set up a time in the Rebbe's schedule, but the boy only wanted a minute, and they arranged the following Sunday night for this boy to go into the Rebbe's room for an audience for 1 minute. That was the request. That was the answer. 1 minute after minute, the boy arrives, and instead of being 1 minute, he was in Yechidus for a very long time. He was in the audience, the Rebbe, very privately for a very long time. So long that the Rebbe's secretary opened the door several times during the audience, and each time the Rebbe told them that he shouldn't disturb. The Rebbe spoke longer and longer. They spoke for a full hour, for an entire hour, which is very unusual. And the boy didn't, when he left the Rebbe's room, he didn't want to talk to Rabbi Yoel at the moment, and he left and went back to Lakewood. But not only did he not want to talk to him at the moment, but after that audience, he stopped talking to Rabbi Yoel, period. Whenever Rabbi Yoel tried to speak to him again, it was very terse, very cold, and Rabbi Yoel, he set his energies elsewhere. Years pass, years and years. Rabbi Yoel is walking, and he hears a car beep and say, "Hey, Rabbi Yoel, you recognize me?" Rabbi Yoel did not recognize him. It was the same yeshiva student. If he was wearing a yarmulke, it wasn't noticeable. He had long curly hair. And he asked Rabbi Yoel if they could start learning chassidus together. So Rabbi Yoel agreed to learn with him chassidus. And they started learning once a week. And Rabbi Yoel didn't want to pressure him. He was very curious about what had happened, but he didn't broach this up. He didn't ask. But after a while, they developed a little more relationship, and Rabbi Yoel I said, I don't want to ask you what happened between Lakewood and where you are today, but I do want to know what happened in that audience that you had with the Rebbe. It puzzled me all this time. What happened in that audience? So the student told Rabbi Yoel the following. He said, I had a very difficult passage in the Talmud that I was studying. I couldn't figure it out. None of my Rosh Hashivas, none of the heads of the yeshiva was able to answer my question. It bothered me. It was a really difficult piece of Talmud. And I figured that I heard the Rebbe is a really great Torah genius. And I figured that if he knows the answer, it's not going to take him more than a minute to answer, because it's one of those things that there's an answer. But that's what this boy decided. So he said it didn't take the Rebbe a minute to answer me. He answered the question in 45 seconds. In 45 seconds, between 30 and 45 seconds, the answer was gone. So he had the answer. It was good. But he's ready to leave. The Rebbe called him back. The Rebbe said, do you study chassidus? And he said, I don't. It's not that I don't have anything against chassidus, he told the Rebbe, but just wasn't for me. I was doing well in studying the Talmud and the commentaries of the Talmud, and I don't see any need to change my pattern. The Rebbe explained to him that the study of chassidus is important, because the study of chassidus leads to Yerushalayim, the study of chassidus leads to fear of heaven. So without the study of chassidus, the Rebbe said, a person can lose sight of the godliness in Torah. And if you lose sight of the godliness in Torah, so then all of your observance of Torah can erode. That's what the Rebbe told this young man. So the guy responded to the Rebbe, I appreciate the premise in theory, but I'm not really worried. With Hashem's help, I'm studying Gemara, I'm studying the commentaries of the Gemara, the Rishonim, and the Code of Jewish Law, and my observance of Torah is steadfast. I could see where I was going. I'd understand why I had to change my path midstream and to study a whole new discipline of Torah. Why should I take the time away from the Torah I was studying it and invest in a whole new path? The Rebbe continued to press the point, and he remained unmoved. He's told Rabbi Yoel, I was doing well, and I saw no reason to change. But then the Rebbe stopped, and the Rebbe looked away. And I don't know where this comes from, but Chassidim say when the Rebbe looks away into the window, it's sort of like a Rebbe's looking into the future. That's what I heard Chassidim say. Either way, whether that's true or not, this certainly was. The Rebbe said, when the yeshiva student doesn't learn chassidus, it might happen that one day he'll walk into the study hall, he'll walk into the Bais Medrash, he'll walk into the Zelle, and he might take offense at another student's petty comment. It will disturb him, and he won't be able to concentrate on his studies. And then, because of this insult, because he feels bad, in his idle time, when he's not studying, you may make the following transgression. You may do the following avera, may do the following sin. The Rebbe mentioned a certain specific sin, a lighter kind of sin. But then the Rebbe said that avera gereres avera, one mistake leads to another mistake, that will lead him to make another mistake. And the next day, he'll do a more severe avera. The Rebbe continued describing a chain of 10 averas. So 10, like in this week's Torah portion, the Torah describes how one mistake leads to another. The Rebbe described in this audience 10 different sins that may occur. And then the Rebbe said, being that he is an honest person, the student will not be able to reconcile his private behavior with his presence in the yeshiva. He's going to leave the yeshiva. From that point on, it will not be long before his connection to his Jewish roots are completely severed. So this boy is listening to the Rebbe speak about all this, and he tells Rabbi Yoel, I knew that I'd taken an hour of the Rebbe's time. I knew that wasn't what I was meant to do. I didn't see the point of continuing the conversation. I told the Rebbe I would think about it, and I left. And he said, that's why I didn't want to speak to you afterwards. I felt, he told Rabbi Yoel, that if I was going to think honestly about the Rebbe's words, I didn't want anyone pressuring me into accepting them. So after thinking it through, I decided to stick to my original position. I was doing well in my studies. So why should I change course and begin studying chassidus? So he told Rabbi Yoel, that's why I continue to avoid you. I knew that you would not let me ignore the Rebbe's words, and you would always bring them up. So I didn't want that. I wanted to get on with my studies and not to have this disturbance. So the boy said that after he left the yeshiva, several months later, and after he left the Rebbe's room, several months later, he came across a very difficult passage in the Talmud. And he started working on it. And he was working on it for days. After working on it for days, he comes into the study hall, comes to the Bais Medrash, and there are two students discussing the very same passage of Talmud he had been working on for such a long time. And he was excited to share with them his insight in this passage. And the students that he shared this with, instead of recognizing the brilliance of what he had shared, they made fun of it. They said the opposite. It's ridiculous what you're saying. And that was hard for him to accept. He worked on it for days, and now not only it wasn't appreciated, but they ridiculed it. So he left the Bais Medrash, he left the study hall in a huff. And afterwards, he said to Rabbi Yoel, I couldn't get my mind back on the studies. And he said, maybe I was tired after working so long. Maybe I was agitated about the comment that the boy said, but I felt I needed to take the night off from studying. And that night he told Rabbi Yoel, I committed the first of the averos, of the sins, of the transgressions that the Rebbe mentioned. From that night on, he said, my life wasn't the same. The pattern the Rebbe suggested, the Rebbe described, unfolded. Each of the 10 transgressions that the Rebbe mentioned happened, just as he said they would. And then, as Rebbe said, he left the yeshiva because he's being an honest person. He couldn't justify his presence in the yeshiva with all these mistakes that he was making. And from then, he tells Rabbi Yoel, now you could see what happened to me. You could see my lifestyle. This is what had unfolded. But this didn't explain why he wanted to learn chassidus all of a sudden. So he continued the story. The boy said, I left Yiddishkeit, and although I married Jewish, but I didn't keep anything at all. I didn't go to Shul Yom Kippur either. I left Yiddishkeit completely. And one day, one of my kids came home, and he said to me, Dad, this guy called me a dirty Jew. Are we Jewish? What does being Jewish mean? So I did have some books of the Talmud in the attic, but I was thinking, and I did remember, lots of concepts in Talmud, but I didn't feel that this was relevant to his question about being Jewish. I didn't know what I should really say to him. So, and it bothered me that I don't know how to answer his question, what does being Jewish mean? So I bought a copy of the Jewish Press. And I looked in the Jewish Press, and the Jewish Press there's an advertisement that the Rebbe is going to lead a farbrengen in this date and this time, and I knew that I wanted to go there. I went to the farbrengen. I decided I'll stay there. I wanted to go and be just to see the Rebbe, and he went. At that farbrengen, when he came in, the Rebbe started talking about the same subject, he said, that he had spoken to me years before in this private audience. The Rebbe said that when a person does not study chassidus, chassidus endows a person with the fear of God, and without chassidus, a person can lose sight of the godliness that's in the Torah. And if that happens, if he loses sight of the godliness, the holiness in the Torah, his entire pattern of observance can easily be eroded. And same subject. So after half an hour, he left. It was late, and he wanted to come back. There's something that attracted him about this. He thought it was remarkable. It was the same subject that the Rebbe had spoken about so many years before. And he kept on buying the Jewish Press. And he was waiting to see when there will be another farbrengen. And sure enough, another farbrengen was announced, the Jewish Press. And he went to 770. And again, he found his place among the Chassidim. He could see the Rebbe, but he doubted that the Rebbe could see him. And again, the Rebbe says the same message. A student may say that he's doing well in his study of Talmud. Why should he begin a new discipline? And he continued using the same arguments that he had used years before when he was speaking to this student privately, how the contribution that chassidus can make in a person's service of God. So this student told Rabbi Yoel, I felt this was more than a coincidence. 2 times I came to the Rebbe's farbrengen, and each time he's speaking of the same subject that he had spoken to me personally about many years before. And I felt he was talking to me personally, but I couldn't understand how he picked me out in the crowd and how he would have recognized me considering the way I looked. The next time he told Rabbi Yoel that I went to a farbrengen was an Achan Shal Pesach, on the last day of Pesach by the Mashiach Suda. But this time, there's no microphone. It was on Pesach. So he told Rabbi Yoel I had to work in the crowd to get closer until the Rebbe's words would be audible. When I got close to the Rebbe, I heard the Rebbe say, when a yeshiva student does not learn chassidus, it may happen that one day he will walk into the study hall and he will take offense at another student's petty remark. This will disturb him, so he won't be able to concentrate on his studies. And this will lead him further to make a mistake. And the next day, and he will do so and so. Never described again the same 10 averos that he had described to him personally, privately, so many years before. So he said to Rabbi Yoel, I felt this was far more than a coincidence, but I still wasn't sure. Because how could the Rebbe have seen me? Why would he speak directly to me when he's still so many other people that were there? So I made up my mind to wait until the end of the farbrengen to join the line for Cashapp bracha. After the Rebbe concluded the farbrengen on Yontiv, on holidays, the Rebbe would lead the benching, lead the grace after meals, and as customary, the wine in the cup of grace after meals is called Cashapp bracha, wine of blessing. So Rebbe would distribute Cashapp bracha after the three major holidays, Rosh Hashanah. And so he decided he's going to stay and go to Cashapp bracha. And he said to himself that if the Rebbe shows any recognition of who he is going to take the Rebbe's words to heart. He's going to begin learning chassidus. So he comes in front of the Rebbe. He said the Rebbe broke out in a very wide smile. He called him by his name. The Rebbe said to him, maybe the time has come for you to learn chassidus. So he said to Rabbi Yoel, he says, that's why I sought you out and I wanted to begin learning. Bottom line is, it's Pesach Sheni. That's a story. Bottom line is, it's Pesach Sheni. It's never too late to fix any mistake that was made in the past. As I mentioned before, also, if there's not some person in your life you feel you should have said something to so many years before, you didn't, tonight's the night, and tomorrow and tomorrow night, it's a time when Hashem empowers us to reach in our personal lives to fix anything. As the previous Rebbe said, there are 3 things called Sheni, 3 things called number 2. There is Pesach Sheni, the second Passover. There is, as it says in Tanya, the second soul of a Jew, which refers to the godly soul. And there's also something called a Cheder Sheni. A Cheder Sheni means, in Hasidic shuls in Europe, there was always a small little room where the oivdim, those who wanted to spend their time speaking to God in davening in a very serious way, they wouldn't daven with the main minyan, they would daven after the minyan privately in some small little room in the synagogue. So that's called the Cheder Sheni, the second room. So the previous Rebbe said, when you take your divine soul and you go into the second room, you take the Nefesh Hasheni, so you go to the Cheder Hasheni, and you talk to the Eibusher, then it becomes Pesach Sheni. Then you get that second chance. Then you get that connection to where you need to be in the world. Hashem should help us all, and we should get into the Cheder Sheni and to reach into the past. And more importantly, reaching the past is in the future. As just like the Jewish people then, they came to Hashem and they said, and God gave them a new mitzvah, Pesach Sheni. So too, Hashem tells us on Pesach Sheni that I'm listening to you. And you ask for Mashiach, you ask at the end of the Golos. Hashem says, just like they asked Hashem to bring him another mitzvah. So Hashem gave him that mitzvah. So too, we have to ask Hashem, Ad Masai, Love Nigora, how come we don't have the Pesach Sheni? How come we don't have all the mitzvahs? How come we don't have Mashiach? And the Eibush listens to us. The Talmud even says that God counted the tears of Sisera's mother. Sisera was a wicked general who attacked the Jewish people, and his mother cried for him when he died. And the Talmud says that God counted his mother's tears. How much more so does God listen to us when we ask Hashem to fix the past and, even more importantly, to rectify the future and bring us the Gula? Hashem, take me a mamish. L'chaim, Mashiach now, l'chaim. Any questions or comments? G'vach Zelle, g'vach Rabbi Yosef, g'vach Beryl, g'vach David, g'vach David. questions, comments, criticism, tomatoes, cucumbers?
Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Good Yontif.
Remember to eat matzah.
Huh?
Remember to eat matzah.
No to eat matzah. Yeah, tomorrow is a custom to eat matzah, more important than the custom.
No talking until Monday morning.